This video is just about the first part of my next project, which is going to be building a kind of an industrial look, motorhead look type bedroom set for my guest room. So I'm going to break it down to several videos, and this is the first one. And as with all my projects, it starts with wood that I've harvested from my backyard and sawn up on my little sawmill. And this is just some ash that I cut several years ago, and it's been stacked. It was outside for a while, and now it's in my garage. It's been drying for several years now. So, the first thing I do is I bring it in and I start to cut it up into, smallest pieces that I can. And I always kind of try to give it a check with the moisture meter. Now, this is just one of those real low-cost moisture meters, and it's not really super accurate, but it does get you in the ballpark for, around under $30. I think it was about $25. So, first thing I do is I just kind of start cutting pieces up and get some readings from the middle of the board so I can, get a good idea of what it's at. And then it's just a matter of, as with any time you deal with rough cut wood, you have to go back and start surfacing all four sides. And, basically what I'm doing now is I'm just going to start by surfacing the edges of the wider boards that are actually too wide to fit on my 8-inch joiner the other way, so I can get one good straight edge to go back over to the table saw and, actually cut them down to widths that are under the 8 inches of that the joiner can handle. Basically, having a nice joiner with a nice long bed really does help when you're handling pieces like this. So, this is kind of like the first part of the process whenever you're going to build a project with rough cut lumber. And seeing how I'm just using home cut air dried wood, I like to just bring the pieces in about a month before I'm going to do the project in the winter time, basically, and just kind of cut them up to the smallest pieces that I can, slightly oversized for what's needed, but I try to just make them into a manageable size that will allow them to do the finished drying quicker. So, basically what I do is I cut the pieces up and then I'll take them up in my grate room, and actually I'll stack them with some stickers by the wood stove for 3 to 4 weeks, and there they are, before actually using the wood, just to let it get customized to the house and, see if I can get the moisture content of it down a little bit more. So there's my stack all ready to go, and it's just a matter of waiting now. And there's some dowels that I just purchased, actually, that'll be used for this video. Now these are actual maple hardwood dowels that I purchased from the Beal company, because I don't know if you saw my first video about setting up the threading jig there. I did try using some cheap dowels, and they just got chip out and tear out and stuff. And these are really good, properly sized hardwood dowel that they sell, and I decided to give them a try and see how they'd work. And I also picked up one of their large countersinks for doing the nuts and the threaded sections, and that did work out real good too. So first thing I did is I took the little router off my CNC router and screwed the base right onto the Beal jig, and there it is, all set up and ready to go. And I find this router really runs smooth compared to that Harbor Freight one that I originally tried. And then what I'm doing is I started with 3-foot dowels, and I'm making spindles for this project that are going to be 12 inches each. So I'm just, I had to go back and cut each of the dowels into thirds to get ready. And let's see, so here, here's the little handles that I made to be able to make it easier to screw the dowels in. So we just put a handle on the end of the piece, and then I turn on the router and just start trying to screw it in. And in the beginning, when you first start out, it kind of takes a while to to get used to. This is the first one that I'm making, and kind of takes a while to get used to. The shake and the play that's in everything, and try to get it turning so it's right on center and stuff. I can see in the future though that I'm going to try to come up with some kind of a power feeder for this to allow me to just drive the dowel right through there without having any shake or anything in it. Drive it right on center. But for now, and the number of parts that I'm making, this really does work really nice. And using this nice smooth running DeWalt router really did a good job. And you're able to, it had the electrical speed control on it, so I wound up running it on number 5, I think it was, just to it gave me a good cut, and there was no burning or anything else. So I was able to match the speed to the job, and it did go real well. And here you can see, once you get it screwed in so far with the handle, it comes to a point where you have to just take the handle off and then spin it out from the back side, and that's where power feeder really will come in handy, so I can just drive it right through. And I will say that using the properly sized dowels and a good hardwood dowel, it really did do a great job on them. It made it real easy to get real consistent results, and there you can see how good they come out. I just had to take a piece of sandpaper in the end and fold it over and just kind of run it through the threads there, just to get some of the little burrs off that were left. But otherwise they were just about perfect. And you can see the nut fits on there real nice, and they're real easy to do. And it just, doing 18 of them like I did, it did take a while, and I did get a little better at it over time, and a little easier to get everything centered and fed easily and straight. So you do get better after the first couple of them. But I will say it really did an excellent job. And it's that little DeWalt compact router there, that's the one that actually I put on my CNC router over a year ago, and that thing's probably got close to 200 hours on it. It runs just as smooth as the day that I bought it and put it on the router. So what I'm going to do in the future is, actually I've got one on order now, is I'm going to order another one of these routers just so I can leave that base on here, and just be able to interchange it between the CNC router and this fixture here, and just have an extra, a whole extra spare assembly for in the future, should this one go down or the brushes need to be replaced or something. So here you can see this is like the last one that I'm running, and it's kind of running in fast motion, but you can see how after a while you get used to it, so you can get a real smooth feed rate on it and stuff. And every one of them came out perfect, so I'm real happy with the way they came out. And this is just the start of it's actually going to be a whole bedroom set that has the same theme by the time I get done with it, and really not sure how long it's going to take. But and there you can see the sawdust that this thing generates, and so I think I'm going to 3D print a dust hood to go on there in the future. And there's some Home Depot gift cards that I got for the holidays, so I did order another one of these routers just to have a spare, and to I just like the feel of it for it doesn't shake and vibrate like that little Harbor Freight one does, and you can adjust the speed down nicely. So I feel like it's a real good router, so I just decided to get a duplicate to have laying around. But as I was saying, this is just the start, my first piece of a bedroom set that I'm making, and it's probably going to take some time till I get it all finished up. But I plan on kind of trying to use these threaded rods and bolts and nuts and whatnot throughout the set to give it a industrial look. And okay, we got the threaded rods done first, so now it's time to go back and start making some nuts. And I decided to use some walnut that I had laying around, and as you can see here, I've kind of collected all the little scrap pieces that I have laying around and decided to use them up. Some of them are pretty bowed and warped, like you can see this one is that's running through the joiner now, and they're all different, pieces, different thicknesses and stuff, but you still start out by, trying to get one good flat side on everything, so you can go back and, plane a second parallel side. And this is my first, time trying to make a bunch of these nuts here, so you will see in a little while that I did run into some issues and some problems, but it was more in the way that I attacked making them, so there may be other ways. This is just the way that I did it. So I got one side flat on a little piece of the walnut, and when you have different thickness pieces, you always have to start with the thickest piece in the planer and run that through until it gets down to the thickness of the other pieces. And so far, that little Wixie planer thickness gauge that I put on there a while back has really been working good, and it's remained accurate, and it's held the setting, and it hasn't had to be recalibrated or anything, so I'm real happy with the way that works out. It does allow me to hit, the number that I'm shooting for easily without double checking. So this is just, just getting all the stock for the nuts down to the same thickness. And, once I get the thickness, I have to go back and just put one straight edge on it all, and you go back to the joiner and do that, and that gives you a good starting point. So now, the only thing I have to do next is go back and rip the width of them. And as you've seen in the past, I like to take and incorporate all the different species of wood from my backyard and each project that I do if I can. So there I've got them, 1 inch jointed. Now I can go back to the table saw and rip them down. And one thing I can tell you though is I've been unhappy with this Frood Premier Fusion blade that I bought a couple years ago. And there you can see it's like it's got such little clearance that any time that you use it builds up like resin around the carbide tips, and it burns anything very easily. So that's one thing that I have not been happy with. That blade's kind of with a mistake, I think, buying it. But so I got these strips ripped to width, and then I went back and just took a first nut that I had hacked out, just to get an idea of the size of the blanks that I'm going to need. And then I just took on my table saw and I, set up a miter gauge to be 30 degrees and made a little block with a stop on it, and decided, this is the way I was going to go about making the nuts. So the first thing I'm doing is turning the blocks into a parallelogram with the 30 degree or 60 degree angle on both sides. And this is what I thought would be the easiest way to do them, but it may not have been. So there it is. I got 70 blocks cut, and now I decided to go back and drill the holes in them. And what I did is I took a couple pieces of scrap and made a little fixture to try and line them up in the drill press, so I could just repeat them and drill one and just slide the next one in place and drill that. And it did work pretty good. But before I was done, I realized that the quill on my drill press had a lot of shake going up and down. So in reality, it did not hit the, there you could see the shift a little bit when I went back up. In reality, it did not hit the exact center of the block every time. It wandered a little bit, so that turned into a big problem in the end. So, it was just a matter of, it's time consuming when you go to make 70 of anything, but first thing I had to do is drill the 7/8 hole in the center of them, and there they are all drilled. Then I went over to this well, actually, I countersunk them all next. In order to thread them without getting tear out on them from the tap, what you have to do is put a slight countersink in each side, and that large countersink bit that I purchased from Beal really did a good job at this. So, and this is where I realized that they weren't all on center, because if I went to sit them back in my little V spot there to hold them, I found out that the countersink wouldn't be on center on all of them once they got flipped around. So after I did that, I took that same fixture and just put a couple different stops on it, and just took a little piece of scrap wood to hold them in place while I cut them, and I was able to go back and cut them to have the actual hex shape on them accurately. And it turns out that when you're making 70 or something like this, it does wind up taking quite a bit of time, by the time you get done with them all. But it was fun to see these nuts start coming to life, and there they are, all roughed out. I got all the nuts roughed out, and the threaded shafts all done, and now it's time to start threading them all. So just when you use this tap, you can see there's like a guide on the front of it that actually gets everything started real nice, straight, and it is fairly easy to tap them all. It does get a little bit squeaky. It's a little annoying noise that drove my dogs upstairs crazy. I did put a little bit of wax on it in the end, and it helped somewhat, but I just didn't want to get too much on the nuts, just in case there'd be a problem with the finishing later. So I did, I did sit there for a while and listen to some squeaking while I tapped them all. And having that nice countersink on there from that big, Beal countersink that I bought really made them, come out nice and clean with no tear out or anything. So, in the end, they did, every one of them came out with a perfect thread, and the tap was still sharp, so looks like it's going to last a long time. Now, here's where I realized that they were slightly off center, so I wound up making a jig to go back and trim all these nuts based off the thread. What I did is I threaded them on the shaft, and then I just indexed them and used that board with a 90 up against them just to hold them there. And here I moved the fence out of the way so you could see, so I could videotape it. But for most of them, I ran with the fence right almost up against the blade there, just to act as a safety guard, so my hand couldn't get near the blade, because it is sticking up, almost an inch and a half there. So, but this actually allowed me to go back and get everything so it was perfectly centered on the thread by, doing it. Did add a lot of extra time to the project, and did make the nuts a little bit smaller than I originally started out with, but at least they all came out pretty much perfect after trimming them like this. I have a much better idea of what's required after learning from my mistakes so far. So the next one should really be a lot easier to make. I'll probably do things a little bit differently. And then once the nuts are all sized up, I had to go back and put the little chamfers on them. There you can see I made a little V-block up and set it up so that I could screw the nuts onto a piece of threaded dowel there, and just drop it down in and hold the back of the nut up against the block and spin it, and basically every one of them will come out with a identical chamfer on it. And here's a little bit better view of how it works and drops in there and goes together. So that did work out pretty good, and gave nice consistent results in the end. Yeah, that little 1-inch sander has been a real handy little thing from Harbor Freight, and it has performed good so far. Then I went back and I took a piece of threaded dowel again, mounted it in the 3-jaw chuck on my lathe. I put a nut on there to space it out so you'd have your knuckles and fingers away from the chuck when you were sanding it. And it's basically let me just go back and sand those chamfers on it and clean them up good. And it did take quite some time to get them all cleaned up good, but like everything else, seems to have been a pretty slow process. And about the only thing left for this part of the process and part of this first video is now that I had all these nuts made and everything ready to go together, I really needed some kind of a wrench to be able to put everything together and tighten it up without marking up the wood and deforming things and stuff. So basically my next part was to go up and start up the AutoCAD Fusion 360 and actually draw up a kind of an oversized wrench that would fit these nuts and help me with the assembly. So it's just a matter of 3D printing that out. It didn't really take that long, and with a 3D printer you really just have to draw it up, do the slicing of the part, and then load the file, and you just walk away and come back 3 hours later and the part's basically done. It's fun to watch a printer work, and it's really great that it actually makes the part with absolutely zero waste. It's kind of a it builds a part up with no waste at all instead of removing material to make a part. So that makes it fun to watch. There it is, all done. Nuts fit perfect in there, and the only thing left to do is to take it down, and that center hole there is sized at the 7/8 inch that the tap requires, so I could run a thread in there also. So basically here it is, going to be used for all my assembly of these nuts, and hoping that'll avoid damaging them with a pair of pliers or anything like that. And there's that center hole. I just figured I'd tap that there so that it could be used as a gauge when I'm making the threaded rods or whatever. So that's basically, this is the end of this first part of it, just making the spindles and nuts to put my the first part of my project together, the headboard that I'm making. And as I said, it's going to be kind of an industrial look, and I'll probably wind up breaking everything into several shorter videos just so that I don't bore you all to death at once. The headboard's just about done, and I will be making that video shortly to just finish up this part of the project. And then I still have end tables to make and shelving to make and a couple other things. So basically this is just the the beginning of my next project I thought I'd share. And the nuts and bolts are all made and the wood has all been dry, and actually the headboard is now pretty much together, so it's just a matter of putting the rest of the video together. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.